I'm Silvia Vignolini. I'm a physicist and I work in a chemistry department, and my research interest is mainly material science. Welcome to my exp. Colors are very important as communication. This is true in our society, something you say we dress to impress, yes, but this is also true in the other system. For example, between animals, in the case of birds is the most spectacular example, I would say. Male and female are different plumage, and often the coloration of the plumage is used to demonstrate that the individual is healthy and strong. So it's like it's a form of communication. Look at me, I'm a good mate. Similarly, in plants is a little bit more complicated, because often in plants you need an interspecies communication. So plants need to communicate with the insect, and color is one of the forms that plants use in order to communicate with pollinators. If I were to explain how color works, I will explain first the two main mechanisms in which you can obtain color. The first mechanism is using pigment or dyes. Pigment or dyes are molecules, and depending on the chemical composition of the molecule, they can absorb part of the visible spectrum, the light that we see around us, that if you want it's a bright white light. And then what is not absorbed is reflected, and this is the color that you perceive. These colors are usually the color that you see around you, like for example this t-shirt, this jacket. They are specific pigments that are then fixed on the fabric and give you this, and what you don't see is what the light is absorbed. However, there are also colors in nature that can be produced out of transparent material. This sounds a bit strange, but in reality we see this phenomenon around us every day when we are washing dishes, for example, in the form of soap bubble. When a soft bubble is formed, you have a really thin layer of water and soap, and this thin layer of water and soap, just because of the thickness of the layer, interact with light with a phenomenon that is called interference, and then you can create color, all the color of the rainbow, without having a specific pigments. And these are called structural color. To look at structural color in real life, you just need simply to sit and look carefully at the neck of a pigeon. You will observe that while the pigeon changed the directionality of the neck, the coloration of the plumage that in the neck, it's completely changed. And this is an example of structural color. And it's not by chance that the first who reported structural color in written reports dates back to Lucrezio more than 2,000 years ago, while he was observing the color of the feathers of a peacock, and he actually also made some theory realizing that this color didn't depend only on the material, but it had to do with something else, that was the interaction of the light and the material itself. He gave a completely wrong explanation of the physical principle, but the observation was intuitively right. In the context of structural color, the color is called iridescent. And iridescent means that it depends from the angle of direction in which you are looking at the color changes. And this is given by the fact that the light interacts with the structure in different way. And this different way is simply the angle in which the light impinges on the structure. This is much less important in the case of pigment, yes, because it's an absorption property. So even if the absorption slightly changes in function of the angle, with our eyes we are not able to perceive a color change, because you just change slightly the intensity. But in the case of structural color, changing the angle really changed the way that the light interacts with the material, and therefore you obtain a completely different coloration. Usually structural color are much more vivid, and they have this iridescent aspect. That means that the color changes in function of the angle, and the coloration is really bright and shiny. And therefore the structural color are often used to be better seen and also used, for example, for photoprotection. If I were to draw this mechanism that is responsible for structural color, which is called interference, first you have to imagine light as a wave. So you just think about like a wave in the sea, yes, that is propagating. Then you have to think about constructive interference, thinking like two mechanical waves that are traveling exactly with the same phase. When it's constructive interference and you have two waves that they have the same phase, somehow the intensity can be larger, yes? In contrast, when you have two waves that are in the opposite phase, you have the opposite effect, it can cancel out. And this is somehow similar to to light. When you have constructive interference, so you can see light. So that's how material at the nanoscale can really control color appearance by playing with this mechanism of constructive and destructive interference. I would like to highlight some of the misconceptions about color. The first, that somehow we are so used to have it around us and we give it a bit for granted that sometimes we cannot appreciate really the functional value. And the first take-home message is, I would say, that is color, it's an important form of communication, yes, for us as human, but in the entire living world. So this would be the first one. The second is color can be produced only by pigment, because this is what we are mainly used of, but actually color can also be produced with this interference mechanism. And third, and I would say maybe that is not necessarily has to do only with color, but is more with how light is manipulated in living organisms. We give for granted how much engineering often is in the structure of living cell that are made to interact with light, like for example, like even trees, and how much interesting structure and architectural form then develop in really simple organisms to have a very sophisticated way to interact with light. And this is the third message that I think it's worth to come across.